The Saudis are very cross with the Americans, and really, if you're cross with the Americans right now, going to Kazan, the capital of Tatarstan, it's one of the sort of bits in the middle of Russia, is a good way to signal it. There's some disagreement about where you want the oil price to go, and the Saudis and the Russians have, in the past, helped keep the oil price up. The Saudis may not be quite so keen on that right now. So you've got some differing views on that. And of course, there are other BRICS countries that are oil importers, like South Africa, and would very much like the oil price to be as low as possible. So there's a lot of talk in the BRICS. They talk about having a different payment system, issuing their own currency, creating a sort of bloc. But fundamentally, the point about the way Western structures work is that the rules apply to everybody, and you have to obey the rules if you don't like them. And that is not the way that Russia or China or these other countries view the world.
Of evil, or what Vladimir Putin's WhatsApp group of his best mates might be called. The Russian president is gathering the leaders of China, Iran, in called BRIC nations is Putin's attempt to counterweigh the power of his Western enemies. We're joined now by Edward Lucas, Times columnist and foreign policy expert. Good morning to you, Edward.
Morning.
I suppose it's a predictable list. Xi, Modi, the new Iranian president. What do you think they might be discussing?
Well, I think that it's quite a big list. It's not just the old BRICS of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. It's now BRICS Plus. So it includes countries like Egypt, for example. And I think that it's really the club of people who don't like sanctions and don't like human rights. And it's a kind of very loosely anti-Western coalition. They don't really agree on very much within themselves. And there's obviously tremendous rivalry from China and India. But they are quite happy, I think, to get together on a symbolic level and just stick two fingers up to Washington and Brussels.
We talked a lot at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine about China's position when it comes to Ukraine, not able to condemn, not able to fully support. What about the others?
There's a very wide range of views on this, and you've got the many countries that basically see Ukraine as a NATO sort of proxy and still have a lingering feeling that Russia is the anti-imperialist champion, which is of course odd because Russia's actually the imperialist in this war. You've got worries about nuclear weapons and nuclear saber rattling from both the Indians quietly and the Chinese rather more loudly, and they very much don't like the idea of Putin waving his nuclear saber. And they also worry a bit that if Russia wins as a result of nuclear blackmail, that may bust the non-proliferation treaty and lead to a sort of nuclear free-for-all. So they're not enthusiastic about Putin's war, but on the other hand, they don't want to see the West win. And so that's why you're getting, Indian help with sanctions busting, which is very much in India's sort of short-term interest. And in China's case, really quite substantial support with non-lethal and sort of sub-military help for Russia, which is helping keep Russia going. Then, of course, we've also got North Korea, which is not in the BRICS, actually sending troops and missiles and artillery shells to the Russians.
Now, Saudi Arabia have been invited too. Do you think it's unlikely that they will go?
Well, the Saudis are very cross with the Americans, and really, if you're cross with the Americans right now, going to Kazan, the capital of Tatarstan, it's one of the sort of bits in the middle of Russia, is a good way to signal it. There's some disagreement about where you want the oil price to go, and the Saudis and the Russians have, in the past, helped keep the oil price up. The Saudis may not be quite so keen on that right now. So you've got some differing views on that. And of course, there are other BRICS countries that are oil importers, like South Africa, and would very much like the oil price to be as low as possible. So there's a lot of talk in the BRICS. They talk about having a different payment system, issuing their own currency, creating a sort of bloc. But fundamentally, the point about the way Western structures work is that the rules apply to everybody, and you have to obey the rules if you don't like them. And that is not the way that Russia or China or these other countries view the world.
Edward, thank you very much for that. That's Edward Lucas, Times columnist and foreign policy expert. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy is in South Korea. Britain wants to deepen security cooperation with the South at a time when North Korea is getting closer to Russia. The Times' Asia editor is Richard Lloyd Parry. Good morning to you. Richard, can you hear me? Oh, we seem to have lost contact with Richard Lloyd Parry, but we will, of course, try to reconnect. Very interesting development, was it yesterday or the day before, because there have been many accusations that North Korea have been sending military personnel to help Russia against Ukraine. And there was that picture, I think it was in the Times yesterday, wasn't it? Where they thought that might be the proof. So the question is really, is this true? Of course, Moscow have said this is not true. And what is the point of it exactly?
Well, we know that North Korea has been providing weapons to Russia for some time. And in fact, the Minister of Defense in Ukraine came out, I think, last week and said, we have killed North Korean troops in Ukraine. We understood those were more kind of like technical support troops helping with some of the weapon systems. Now it seems it could be infantry. But I mean, you know, the level of cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow, I mean, is a big question now.
It really is. And the Ukrainian president actually says, he's got numbers. His accusation is that they're preparing to send 10,000 soldiers to Russia, and is calling for everyone, obviously, to condemn that. And this is all overshadowing, really, David Lammy's visit to South Korea, because South Koreans obviously not happy about this either. You know, they think about their own security, I suppose. Let's have a word now with the Times' Asia editor, Richard Lloyd Parry. Morning, Richard.
Hello there, Esma.
Can you just bring us up to date, first of all, with this issue that has kind of piqued everyone's interest, these accusations that North Korea may be sending troops into Ukraine to help Russia?
Yeah, it's slightly confusing because the thing that's lacking is any clear confirmation from the United States, which has the most extensive and sophisticated intelligence apparatus really in the world. You'd think if anyone knew about this, they would. But they haven't really said very much about it. However, the Ukrainians have said, President Zelensky has said that he believes that some 10,000 North Korean troops could end up being sent to Ukraine. South Korea has come up with similar numbers, maybe 12,000. They say that 1,500 special forces are already on their way. Now, these kind of claims can be very political. Zelensky obviously has an interest at the moment in appealing to the world to contribute to his war. And perhaps it will help him if he can persuade people that this war with Russia is at risk of, as he said, becoming a world war involving other powers. So you have to be a bit careful and a bit cautious. But certainly it seems clear that there are some North Koreans, at least engineering specialists, technical artillery specialists in Ukraine, Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine, observing and fine-tuning the North Korean artillery, which they have supplied to Russia. But the exact numbers, you know, who's exactly doing what, we're not 100% sure. And I think a bit of caution is needed before we conclude that it's large numbers of North Korean troops going over there. I don't think that's happened yet.
Okay. Now, this visit by David Lammy to South Korea, what does he want to? What kind of flows both ways, really, in terms of security and economic growth?
Yeah, I mean, South Korea is, you know, an important partner in East Asia for the UK. In the last 5-10 years, certainly since Brexit, British governments have made it a priority to re-engage in a way with East Asia. Obviously, you know, in terms of economic trading relationships, but also in security. So, you know, most years now, the British Armed Forces send out some kind of deployment. You know, it has even been an aircraft carrier out to East Asia. It usually stops in South Korea as well as Japan. And they're keen to build on that. David Lammy, in his statement with his South Korean counterpart today, they both mentioned AUKUS, which is this deal with the United States and Australia Australia to provide Australia with nuclear-powered submarines. Now, it's not only that, they also want to draw in countries such as Japan and South Korea into developing defence technology. It's not clear, exactly where that's going to lead, but they talked about that, and the South Koreans were open to that. So there weren't any kind of big, concrete, clear announcements. But I think David Lammy, wants to send the signal that, the UK is a player in the region, although clearly much smaller than the United States, and that it wants to engage and it supports South Korea. And he very clearly, denounced any suggestion that that North Korean troops are going to South Korea. He said that would be a very bad thing.
Okay, Richard, thank you for that. That is Richard Lloyd Parry. He is the Times' Asia editor.